So, Bridget, as you may know, WGTE is based in Toledo, Ohio, and I hear from a little bird that you are an Ohioan yourself.
That's correct. I hail from Findlay, Ohio, but my dad was born and raised in Toledo. And I have to say, I am a huge Northwest Ohio fan.
Was it in Findlay that you first fell in love with the harp?
That's correct. So actually, my parents insisted that all of us Kibbey kids play the piano. So we started with Suzuki piano lessons with an amazing teacher named Jane Kuchar. But when I was 9 years old, we traveled to Bluffton, Ohio to attend a church service, literally an old Mennonite church in the middle of cornfields. And that's where I first saw Jan Bishop play her golden harp, and my jaw hit the floor. My dad noticed and suggested it'd probably be an easy transition to go from piano to harp. So why don't you try it? And it really stuck at that point.
Wow. And did
I,
you find that was an easy transition, or what was that like?
Yes, so it's funny. There are like these methods of teaching, and I have to just say, like Ohio has some of the best string teachers, string players coming out of it because of these enclaves of teachers, devoted teachers, and the Suzuki method or otherwise, the Weilersteins near Cleveland and Columbus for violin and cello. But for the harp, Jan Bishop was really an incredible inspiration that got me started on the instrument via that Suzuki method and drove me all around the Midwest to conferences. I could play in ensembles. So yes, it was a great place to be introduced to music. And then of course, our local high school conductor, David Hansen, was local high school orchestra conductor, was a real influence and just phenomenal and inspiring us, amateur young musicians to play incredible repertoire. It was just a great place to be raised.
From what I've heard on your new album, Crossing the Ocean, you're really venturing into some uncharted territory. It's harp music like maybe we've never heard before. At what point did you get really excited about exploring the full capacities of the harp?
I think it's just been something that I've been interested in my whole life ever since I've been playing, but especially moving to New York, it's really been the wonderful international communities that surround me and going out to hear live music and also dancing. I was really into the salsa scene in New York City for many years. And through all of those experiences, I was welcomed in to improvise, perform alongside musicians that immigrated to New York from other countries. And this record is really kind of my first love letter to a few of those communities. The first few tracks, you're going to hear straight ahead folk music. It's like joropo, it's almost dance music on the harp that came about from, collaboration with a friend who loves the popular song and dance forms from South America. Or maybe later in the disc, there's this piece written by a Syrian composer that almost sounds like a nightclub mixed with dabke, which is a dance form from the Arab world. So yeah, it's really kind of this merger of friendships and relationships that have really expanded my perspective on the instrument.
And did you share with them or provide them with a particular prompt for the album, or did you just give them kind of free rein as they were composing?
That's a really great question, Mary Claire. I did, in fact, give each composer the same prompt, which was, what is the rock from which you're cut? And how do those early musical influences resonate within your current surroundings? And I thought that would be an interesting question to ask Mary Claire, because each of these composers immigrated to the US from, four continents, six countries, and they each bring a different set of folk music or native music they grew up hearing to the table. But the harp kind of exists in these two worlds, in my perspective, which is that high art classical music tradition, but also the harp has existed all over the world throughout time and place and really interesting iterations. The kora, the klarsak, the lute, the jun, the kanun in Turkey. And so this record for me is kind of this fusion between the modern and also real hard on your sleeve folk music. And I think that's where I like to sit. And these composers all reacted to that question in very different ways.
Mm. And how did you find when you were collaborating with them? Was there a lot of back and forth, or was it just how did that work with them?
Yes, I think when you're writing for the harp, it's always nice to have like a sit down with the composer and kind of share what I love about the instrument. I always start collaborations with composers by, sharing scores I love by the great masters who wrote the best for the harp. That's Debussy, Ravel, maybe the Sarah Concerto, which I love. I share those scores so they can get a look at them. Then I play them through so they can see the way the hands interact with the strings. But then after that, I say, look, now you kind of have swum, or you did some swimming, swam, in what harp writing has traditionally been. Now just ditch all that and write exactly what you want to, and then we'll work from there. And I was so pleased that each composer submitted scores that I could really sit down and play. There was some editing and modifying of configurations to make it, resonate better on the harp, or to be more idiomatic in my hands. But for the most part, they just gave me incredible pieces that really challenged me technically and musically, and has taken my technique to a new level because they saw the instrument in ways I had never thought of. And I think that's one of the fun, outpourings from this record, is just, really being brought in the way I see the instrument.
Yeah, and from what I understand, most of these composers were writing for the first time for harp. Is that right?
That's correct. One of them, Kati Agocs, she wrote for my first record, and I loved that collaboration so much. I had to include her on this, but the others, it was all their first time. We have a jazz giant, Paquito de Rivera, writing for concert harp for the first time, and he just really knocked it out of the park. David Bruce, Avner Dorman, Kinan Azmeh, Doyun, all had really different takes of the instrument. And I'm hoping that this has inspired them to keep writing for the instrument, because they all did such an amazing job.
Do you feel like composers can be a little bit shy sometimes about writing for the harp?
Yes, very clear. You just know they're intimidated by the fact that the harp has pedals. A lot of people, even my musician friends who have not played with a harpist, they don't realize that in order to create the frets or the sharps and flats on the instrument, we're moving our feet, these pedals that manipulate and shorten the string by a half step. So it's a complicated mechanism. And we also don't use our pinkies, they're too short. We only use 4 fingers per hand. So it does require some thinking about how to make that chromaticism, or those sharps and flats, those accidentals, work on the instrument so that you're not aware of it. You just want to hear the harp fly, which in this record definitely had some speed demon moments that were pretty challenging in awesome ways and fun ways. But to make it sound effortless and idiomatic for the instrument is definitely a challenge. And that's why I always encourage composers at conservatories and colleges to get in a room with a harpist and send her, 8 measures of music and say, what do you think of this? And just hear it coming back at you. And that's so informative to know, like, what your harp writing preconceptions might be. You might be surprised how awesome of a composer you are in writing for the harp.
Wow, well, I hope that encourages more composers to experiment and have some fun with harp writing. You mentioned these speed demon moments in this album, Crossing the Ocean, and I'd be curious to hear more about some of the different techniques, special techniques that you're using throughout.
That's a great question. Well, I think the challenge of the first 3 tracks is that I'm basically referencing joropo, which is a really fast flying, feet flying dance in Venezuela. It's danced in Colombia, Venezuela at weddings. It was originally a dance that slaves created to kind of make fun of their Spanish masters. So it's a really fast waltz. So it's really technically demanding to play this fast rhythm in my right hand, with the bass lines in the left being a completely different meter. And you have to be within the groove, even though you're going so quickly. You want it to feel effortless. So when I was practicing the first movement, especially, and how to go energetic, I remember thinking, look, you're gonna ride this train, and then when you get comfortable with how fast you're playing, mentally just rise up 20,000 feet, and then you see that train go by, and it doesn't feel like it's so fast, right? So it was kind of this mental game where once my hands were comfortable with the configuration and just like rocking and doing their thing, I could rise above and just watch this incredible dance and groove unfold. And since the time of recording this record, I've actually been working with some incredible musicians from global traditions of gypsy music in Turkey to Latin Grammy winning percussionists from Colombia. And I'm playing these grooves, and I've gotten really comfortable with it because I'm playing with percussion. But I think this record really prepared me for that, because I had to sit within this dance form and be comfortable there and just enjoy riding the wave.
I find it really interesting, that concept of rising above. Is that a way that you I guess, avoid getting too much in your head?
I think that's a great way of putting it, Mary Claire. I definitely have a lot of energy on stage. And so I've had to learn over the years to have distance from what I'm doing. You've done the work in the practice room, you've done the work in the studio. And then when you go on stage or into the recording room, you can trust that work and then just have some distance and watch it going by as you're executing it. And it's a really satisfying feeling to be a part of that live moment, but trusting that you've got it. And so you can have a little bit of cushion and space to enjoy listening to the harp in the room. I mean, the instrument has the best resonance. It's so special. And the best thing about performing or recording is enjoying the live moment of how the harp resonates in that space.
Sure. What has been one of the most meaningful aspects about this project for you?
I think it's really about the friendships and the developing friendships. I think this project was a kickoff for me and, referencing, I would say, 6 different cultures, 6 different elements via these composers. But from that, it's really been almost like a launch for me into, some new worlds of playing the harp and digging deeper canyons into some of these world music stories. For example, I've been touring with an incredible Persian singer who actually moved to the States because she refuses to not sing alone on stage in Iran. And so she's officially a criminal in Iran, but she's an incredible singer. And I fully improvise a 45-minute show with her where I'm playing over these Persian modes and rhythms. And she's kind of taught me that tradition. And so I think it's been really fun. That's one example of a deeper dive into some of these musical traditions that have added up to maybe what we call today flamenco or Albanian special Spanish classical music. It's been fun to go further back and, dig these deeper roots into some of these cultural narratives.
Yeah. Oh, we'll let you go in just a moment, but are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with us before we do?
Well, I'd love for you to all to just check out the record. You can do that on my website. I made a really wonderful music video for it. I'm so thankful to have an amazing producer, Adam Abe's house, and all the composers are amazing. And I would love to give a special love shout out to soprano Dawn Upshaw, who is incredible, has been a muse to me for many years. I am so pleased she's a special guest on this record. She just really continues to inspire with her musicianship and her amazing voice. And I'm just so thankful that I got to speak to you all and in Toledo. I'm here in New York City, but my heart is in Northwest Ohio. So thank you so much for having me back on the program, Mary Claire.
It's been great speaking with you. And there you have it. That's the word on Crossing the Ocean, performed by harpist Bridget Kibbey. And Bridget is from Northwest Ohio herself. So it's so fun to have a local artist on Classical Conversations today. Bridget, congratulations on the album released, and thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.